I thought she just didn't love me. But when she died, I found a hiding place in her things. And there are letters. Not just letters, but instructions on how to hide me. From whom? I found out later. Growing up, my grandmother lived with us in our small two-bedroom house on the outskirts of town. The woman never smiled, never hugged me, never told me she was proud. Instead, every single day was the same routine of harsh whispers and cold commands. Sit quietly. Don't draw attention. You're not like everyone else. Don't let people see you. I remember being 7 years old, wanting to join the school baseball team like all my friends. When I brought home the permission slip, she snatched it from my hands so fast it gave me a paper cut. Her eyes went wide with something that looked like terror, but I was too young to recognize it then. She just shook her head and muttered those same words again. You're not like everyone else. The permission slip went straight into the trash. Birthday parties were off limits. School plays were forbidden. Even when my teacher suggested I join the gifted program because of my test scores, my grandmother showed up at school the next day and had me removed from consideration. I watched through the classroom window as she spoke intensely with the principal, her hands gesturing frantically. When she came home, she was quiet for hours, just sitting in her rocking chair, staring at nothing. My mom worked double shifts at the diner and wasn't around much, so it was just me and my grandmother most days. She'd follow me around the house like a hawk, always listening for cars in the driveway, always peeking through the curtains. If someone knocked on the door, she'd grab my arm and pull me into the back bedroom until they left. Delivery drivers, neighbors, even the mailman. Everyone was a threat in her mind. The worst part was how she looked at me sometimes. Not with love or even annoyance, but with this deep, bone-crushing fear. Like I was going to disappear at any moment. Like someone was going to come and take me away. I started believing I was some kind of burden, some mistake that had to be hidden from the world. When I turned 16, I'd had enough. I confronted her one evening after she'd refused to let me get my driver's license. I demanded to know why she hated me so much, why I couldn't be normal like other kids. She just sat there in her chair, tears streaming down her weathered face, repeating the same thing over and over. You don't understand. You're not safe. You're not like everyone else. I stopped talking to her after that. For 2 whole years, we lived in the same house but barely exchanged words. I ate dinner in my room, did my homework alone, counted down the days until I could leave for college. She tried to reach out a few times, leaving plates of my favorite cookies outside my door, but I was too angry and hurt to care. Update 1. My grandmother died of a heart attack 3 months before my high school graduation. I found her in her rocking chair on a Tuesday morning, still in her nightgown, looking more peaceful than I'd ever seen her. The guilt hit me immediately. All those years of silence, all those missed opportunities to understand each other. My mom was a wreck during the funeral preparations, so I ended up handling most of the arrangements. While cleaning out my grandmother's bedroom, I noticed something strange about the old Persian rug by her dresser. One corner was slightly raised, like something was underneath it. When I pulled it back, I found a loose floorboard. Underneath was a metal box, the kind people use for important documents. My hands were shaking as I opened it. Inside were dozens of letters, old photographs, and official-looking papers. The first letter I picked up was addressed to my grandmother, dated just 2 years ago. The return address made my blood run cold. It was from a private investigator. The letter detailed how they were still actively searching for someone, how they traced connections to our city, how they were getting closer. The name they were looking for wasn't mine, but as I kept reading, pieces started falling into place. They were looking for the child of a man who'd been involved in something serious enough that people were still hunting for him decades later. I spent the entire night going through everything in that box. There were newspaper clippings about a robbery gone wrong, about someone who'd stolen a significant amount of money and disappeared. There were photos of a man who looked exactly like me. Same eyes, same nose, same stubborn jawline. And there were letters from my mom, written when she was barely 18, begging my grandmother to take me in because she couldn't keep me safe. The final piece was a birth certificate with a different name than the one I'd grown up with. My real father wasn't the guy my mom had always claimed walked out on us. My real father was someone much more dangerous, someone who'd made enemies powerful enough to keep searching for his family 20 years later. Update 2. I confronted my mom the next morning, and everything came tumbling out. She'd been 17 when she met my father, thought he was just some charming guy with a nice car and expensive clothes. She had no idea he was involved in organized crime until it was too late. When things went bad and he had to run, she was already pregnant with me. My father had stolen something valuable, not just money, but information that could destroy several important people. Before he disappeared, he'd warned my mom that they'd come looking for his family, that we'd never be safe as long as we stayed visible. My grandmother had helped create new identities for both of us, moved us across the country, and spent every day since then looking over her shoulder. The private investigators' letters revealed that they'd found my mom's old address, tracked down some of her friends from back then, and were slowly piecing together where we'd gone. They knew about me, knew I existed, but didn't know what name I was using or exactly where I was. My grandmother had been getting these updates for years, watching the net close around us inch by inch. But here's where everything took a turn I never saw coming. As I was going through more of the papers, I found something that didn't make sense. There were bank statements showing regular deposits into my grandmother's account, large deposits that had been going on for 15 years. The deposits were coming from an account I didn't recognize, but when I traced the routing number, it led to a bank in Nevada. I hired my own private investigator, a different one, and asked him to look into those account numbers quietly. What he found changed everything I thought I knew about my situation. The money wasn't coming from some random source. It was coming from my father. My father wasn't dead. He'd been alive this whole time, and he'd been sending money to support me. Not only that, but he'd been keeping tabs on the people who were looking for us. The private investigator who'd been writing those threatening letters? My father had been feeding him false information for years, sending him on wild chases to different cities, different states, anywhere but where we actually were. The man I'd grown up thinking was a dangerous criminal who'd abandoned us was actually orchestrating an elaborate shell game to keep us safe. Every time the people looking for him got close to finding us, he'd surface somewhere else, leave just enough of a trail to draw them away, then disappear again. Final update. The truth about why my grandmother was so terrified finally made complete sense, but it also revealed something I wasn't prepared for. My father hadn't just been protecting us from his enemies. He'd been protecting us from something much more complicated. In the very bottom of that box, wrapped in plastic and hidden under everything else, was a letter addressed to me specifically. It was in my father's handwriting, dated just 6 months earlier. He'd somehow gotten it to my grandmother without anyone knowing. The letter explained everything. Yes, he'd been involved in criminal activity, but not by choice. He'd been forced into it by people who'd threatened his family, his parents, his sister, everyone he cared about. When he'd finally found a way out, he'd taken evidence that could destroy these people, but he'd also made himself a target for life. But the real revelation was about me. I wasn't just some random kid who needed to be hidden. I was insurance. My father had hidden copies of his evidence in multiple locations, and one of those locations was connected to me in a way that only he knew. If anything happened to him, if he disappeared permanently, there was a way for me to access information that could protect our family and destroy the people who'd been hunting us. The problem was, he could never tell me directly because even meeting me once would put me in immediate danger. So he'd spent 18 years watching from a distance, making sure I stayed invisible, making sure the people looking for him never connected me to him directly. My grandmother's constant fear wasn't just paranoia. She'd known the whole time that I was more than just a hidden family member. I was a walking target with information locked away inside my own life that I didn't even know existed. The letter included instructions on how to access a safety deposit box that had been set up in my name years ago. Inside was enough evidence to either destroy the people who'd been hunting us or get us all killed if it fell into the wrong hands. My father had been waiting for me to turn 18, waiting for me to be old enough to make the choice about what to do with this information. But there was one more twist that I discovered when I finally went to that safety deposit box. Along with all the evidence and documents, there was a current address. My father hadn't just been hiding and sending money. He'd been living 3 hours away for the past 5 years, close enough to help if something went wrong, but far enough away to keep me safe. The address came with a simple note. If you're reading this, it means your grandmother is gone and you've found everything. You have a choice now. You can take this evidence to the authorities and end this once and for all, or you can walk away and keep living the quiet life she worked so hard to give you. Either way, know that every day you were hidden was a day you were loved more than you could ever imagine. I drove to that address the next weekend. My father was working in his garden when I pulled up, and when he saw me, he dropped his tools and just stood there with tears in his eyes. He looked older than in the photos, more tired, but he had the same face I saw in the mirror every morning. We didn't talk about the evidence or the danger or any of the complicated stuff that first day. We just sat on his porch and shared stories about the 18 years we'd missed together. He told me about every birthday he'd celebrated alone, Every school event he'd watched from a distance, every time he'd wanted to reach out but knew it would put me in danger. I learned that my grandmother had been sending him photos and report cards and little updates about my life all these years. He knew about my grades, my interests, my personality. He'd been as much a part of my life as any parent could be without actually being there. In the end, I made the choice to turn over the evidence. Not because I wanted revenge or justice, but because I was tired of living in fear of something I'd never understood. The people who'd been hunting my family went to prison, and for the first time in my life, I could make decisions without worrying about staying invisible. My father and I are building a relationship now, slowly and carefully. My mom is still adjusting to having him back in our lives, but she's healing too. And every time I drive past my grandmother's grave, I stop and tell her that I understand now. Her coldness wasn't rejection. It was the most fierce kind of love, the kind that sacrifices everything, even the chance to be loved back, to keep someone safe. I was different from everyone else, but not in the way I'd always thought. I was different because I'd been chosen for protection, wrapped in layers of secrecy and sacrifice that I'd mistaken for cruelty. My grandmother spent 20 years carrying the weight of our family's safety on her shoulders, and she never once let me see how heavy that burden was. Sometimes the people who love us most are the ones who seem to love us least, and sometimes the greatest kindness looks like the deepest cruelty until you understand the whole story.